The question of whether social media usage affects our mental health has actually been around for a relatively long time. But what happens is that a lot of us don't pay attention to it because obviously we're so invested in it and we've become desensitized to the effects that it has on us and the effects that it has on our mental health. But today I'm going to be sharing with us 3 reasons why we believe that not only does social media have an impact on our mental health, it is the reason for the prevalence of mental health issues among the youth. The first reason I'm going to be sharing with us is isolation, the second is social comparison, and the third is anxiety. Now, as human beings, we all need personal connections, we all need communication with others for optimal mental well-being. But what happens is that the more that we engage with our social media, the more that we are cut off from reality, the more that we are cut off from others. And this places us in a state of isolation, it places us in a state of loneliness. In fact, a study that was carried out in the University of Pennsylvania on 143 students, found out that out of the students that committed to limiting their social media usage time, they reported decreased feelings of loneliness, they reported decreased feelings of depression. And from these sorts of studies, you can kind of see that there is a direct relationship between increased social media usage and feelings of isolation and feelings of depression. And another interesting fact about depression, especially in this region actually, is that the UAE actually has the highest regional level of depression. We are at about 5.1% of the population, so that's interesting. Now, onto social comparison. It's no secret that we're constantly comparing ourselves to other people's lives. I mean, think about it. When was the last time that you looked through your social media, you looked through your YouTube, you looked through your Instagram, and you thought, oh yay, my life is so much better than all these people and I can sleep at night? Or, when was the last time you went to these same mediums and you thought, wow, why is her life so much better than mine? Or why does she travel? Or, why is her significant other so good looking? When am I going to get paid up? When am I going to catch trips and take flights and all these type of things? So what happens is that a study actually that was published in the Journal of Social and Clinical Psychology by, I forget their name, sorry. But what they found is that Facebook usage causes depression. But even further than that, they found that the relationship between Facebook usage and depression is what I've been talking to you about, social comparison. So in other words, they found that the reason that people were depressed after increasingly using Facebook was because they felt bad about themselves after constantly comparing themselves to others. And this brings to mind actually a communication model that was put forward by Paul Walther. It's called the hyperpersonal communication model. What that model postulates is that whenever we are in a computer-mediated communication setting, which is just basically big words for whenever we are relating and engaging with other people through devices, we are encouraged and allowed to present optimal versions of ourselves. That means we're allowed to present only the best of the best versions of ourselves. And that relates back to what I was saying about social comparison, because of course we find ourselves lacking when we compare ourselves to other people, because we're not seeing the real picture. We have an unrealistic measure of expectation, so of course we find ourselves lacking. And a bunch of other research, if I had the time, I would share with you, that says the exact same thing in different words. Now, what are the 2 things I've talked to you about? I've talked to you about isolation, I've talked to you about social comparison. Now I'm going to share with you a bit about anxiety. Now, lots of studies have actually proven that social media causes anxiety, but I want to talk to you specifically about a disorder called fear of missing out, FOMO for short. Now, this disorder is actually very unique to our generation because we're the generation that was practically born into social media. And what it is that it is an emotional or mental strain that is caused by this perceived idea that something more interesting, something more exciting is going on your social media. And so you're constantly interrupting your daily life just on the off chance that you come across something more interesting. I mean, think about it. How many times have you been in class and you knew that you would probably be better off listening to your professor, but your Instagram was practically calling you? Or even worse, been in the car driving and you got a text and you knew it was probably safer to wait till you get home. But you just had to, what if it's your best friend with the latest gossip? You can't miss that. And so these things, we don't think about the repercussions because it's so fast. Our brains just have this, we're so accustomed to it, and it happens in the blink of an eye. And I want us to know that these things that I've spoken to us about, actually, it goes beyond just our mind. It affects our family.
Time.
Sorry. Am I done?
Yes.
Oh, sorry. Okay, it
It's
goes
5
beyond
minutes.
sound mind. Thank you.
Okay, Angela, you raised some really great points. You mentioned social comparison, which does happen with social media. You end up comparing your low points with somebody's high points. And you also mentioned FOMO, which is a type of anxiety where you don't want to miss out, because then you see your friends or people going on vacation or hanging out, doing things without you. However, this sounds like a human being issue, not a social media issue. What do you have to say on that?
I totally agree with that in the sense that there's something called, just to answer that question, there's something called the reinforcing spiral communication theory. What it says is that factors that are close to our identity cause things, and then, cause media effects, and then those media effects end up causing the same exact thing. So the fact that we are predisposed to comparison is a fact. And that is why we seek out social media. But then social media in turn fuels that desire, and then right back comes. So I could argue with you that we don't know where that started, but I would say that in general, yes, that's a good point, but the social media aspect of it is very present and very real, especially in this time. Now, talk to me 20 years ago, maybe you could argue with me that it had nothing to do with that. But now in this time, it is the main cause of the social comparison that we face.
Okay. Fatma?
Hello. Am I audible? Yes. Okay. Right. Leslie has raised some really good points, but I'm happy she's raised them because I have a response to most of these points. Right. So social media is a fairly new technology. I think it was 1999 when the first proper social media platform came out. And as humans, we are still adapting to that sort of powerful tool that we have in our hands. So while we are learning to use social media, there are going to be some drawbacks, some negative effects. So for example, when the telephone came out, did we blame telephones for the things that people said on them? No, so that goes to show that social media is the medium and not the message. So in order of saying social media is the cause of mental health disorders, we need to learn how to guard ourselves from the negative impacts of social media. So what I'm trying to say is social media is essentially about you as a person. If you're someone who lacks confidence or have low self-esteem, you're probably more prone to be affected by the negatives of social media. So what we have to do is look at ourselves and not blame a tool that's in our hands. Because it's easier for us as a society right now, especially with the rising awareness of mental health, to blame all of these negative habits on social media. Right. My next point is there are so many other factors that we have to consider before we begin to blame mental health disorders on social media. Some external factors are where we live. So for example, the Arab Spring, which happened a few years ago, people were put under such extreme conditions that they were pushed to revolt against their governments. And with that came a lot of mental health issues as well. It was due to corruption, due to inflation, due to unemployment and so on. So these things are the things that we need to focus on mental health-wise, because they do cause a lot of families distress and so on. And in this case, not only was social media not a cause of mental health issues, it was actually a refuge for the people. It helped them unite and overthrow entire systems. Now, family upbringing. We all know that the first few years of your life are like very essential to who you are as a person, how you develop. So people who are more likely to develop mental health issues, it has to do with the way they were raised. So for example, parents who tend to fight often or over-involved in their children's lives, their children are at an increased risk of getting depression, according to Reuters Mental Health. Again, another factor that you have no input in, your genetics. Before you're even born, some parts of your personality are determined, and they make you more inclined to have mental health issues. So for example, a recent study by University of California shows that certain genes are relevant to certain traits in you. So for example, WSCD2, which is a group of genes, is linked to extroversion and neuroticism, which is one of the big 5 personality traits, relevant to anger, jealousy, fear, and so on. So how can we blame social media if it's something that's already built in us? It's such a complex issue. We cannot merely say this is because of social media. Now let's look at where we live right now. Why are people more depressed in the UAE? Let's say if that is the case. we live in a culturally diverse society. There's a high obesity rate in the UAE. There's the foreignness and isolation of being in the UAE. 88% of us are expats. And the last point is lack of job security. Now, what I mean by that is a lot of us are here as a stepping stone to maybe further opportunities. This is not our home. So with that comes a bit of loneliness, being disconnected from your families and so on. All of these things play a huge factor into your mental health. So we cannot just say, oh, it's because of social media. You have to consider obesity, for example. 37% of the UAE is obese. Obesity and depression go hand in hand. We don't know whether obesity causes depression or whether depression causes obesity, but we do know that there's a link between them. So that is something that we need to fix. That is something that we can blame for our mental health, but we cannot blame social media. Thank you.
Thank you, Fatma. So you put the responsibility on us and our upbringing and how we should use social media responsibly, that it's just a tool. What if social media is a tool that amplifies mental illness? Wouldn't that be an issue?
It isn't. It is what's happening now. It's amplifying certain issues that were before, like they were there before, and now they're coming to light because of social media. So, Dr. Bloomberg, a psychologist in the University of California, also he stated that insecurity was always there, but we just get to see it more now. It doesn't mean that insecurity is more of a thing now. It's always been there as humans. So. It's good. It's a good thing that it has brought these mental health issues to light, but now it's better because we can actually tackle these things from the core rather than blame it on the tool. Thank you.
Okay, good. So it sheds some light on an issue that was already present. It didn't actually increase it. Okay. Okay, now, Mona.
Do I have to go first? Okay, guys, I'm 4, which means I believe that social media does impact our mental stability. So by the end of this, I want you guys to reconsider what you think. Do you still believe that social media is harming our mental stability? If not, think again. I'm going to be discussing 3 ways in which I believe social media has impacted our mental stability. I'll be discussing social media anxiety disorder, the impact of social media on body image, and the need for validation. Now, there has been a rise in a disorder called social media anxiety disorder, which is similar to social anxiety. However, it's when he or she cannot go 3 hours without checking their phone. Now, honestly speaking here, who can go 3 hours without checking their phone? Come on, guys, I don't believe that, honestly. I expected less hands. I was gonna be like, are you sure? Anyways, basically, according to Melanie Curtin, who's a professor, she found out that 20% of people on social... You can put your hand down now. It's okay. Hello? He's on his phone, so point proven. He can't go by. Okay, guys. So according to Melanie Curtin, she found out that 20% of people on social media cannot go 3 hours without checking their phones, and the average person spends 4 hours a day on their device. Now, when you guys are done, not now, there's this thing on our phones called screen time. Do you guys know about it? Okay, never mind. I was gonna speak about that. But anyways, for those who don't know, it's this thing that tracks, like you just turn it on your phone, and it tracks exactly the amount of hours that you spent on your device. It shows you exactly the amount of hours you spend on WhatsApp, Instagram, or any sort of social media. And when I turned mine on, I was very surprised. Now, the second thing I want to discuss is the impact of social media on body image, which honestly is a very sensitive topic. Now, how many of us scroll through Instagram or WhatsApp or Facebook and we're constantly bombarded with advertisements of models and things about clothing lines or food, anything. And the people that are portrayed in these advertisements always look really good. They're always very fit, they always have clear skin, and basically what this does to us is it causes us to start comparing ourselves subconsciously. You may think you're not comparing yourself to them, but like in the back of your head, it's always a thought that's there. So according to the study of University of Pittsburgh, they found a correlation between the time spent on social media and negative body image feedback. And they found out that the more time you spend on social media, the more likely you are to have eating and sleeping disorders. Now, the National Eating Disorder Association reports that 1 in every 3.8 television commercials conveys an attractiveness message, telling viewers what is considered to be attractive. And the reason why I mentioned television commercials is due to the media conversions. Everything that is accessible on TV is on our phones as well. We all know how fast things on the media travel. Now, the typical American teen sees 5,260 of these messages a year. So we can see the connection between eating disorders and body image. Now, this one's for you guys, for the men. Apparently, the Mirror Eating Disorder Help Association found that the more often young men read fitness magazines, the more likely they felt dissatisfaction about their bodies. And for the girls, 74% of girl articles said that becoming more attractive was a reason to go to the gym. So now, like, going to the gym stopped being a reason for us to be healthier. However, it was a reason for us to look better. I was honestly shocked. Like, people stopped going to the gym in order to look, like, to become more healthy. Now, according to the cultivation theory by Gebner, the more time people spent living in the television world, the more they are to believe the social reality portrayed on television. You guys know this saying that says, you lie so much, you start to believe in your own lie? That's basically what social media does to us. They portray the perfect image by lying to us, which made us believe that this is reality. Now, on to my last point, the need for validation and recognition through social media. Wait, don't stop me. I want to say this. Now, you guys know, last week I posted 2 pictures on Instagram. One picture got less likes than the other one. And the picture that got less likes, it just made me want to delete that picture. Now, I don't know if it's just me, but I didn't receive the recognition and validation that I was expecting. And that's what social media does to us. We seek recognition and validation through others to fill in a missing gap that we may have, which may be insecurity, loneliness. Now, according to a study of the UCLA Brain Mapping Center, they found that receiving a high number of likes on Instagram or Facebook or anywhere showed increased activity in the reward center of the brain. So we feel like we're being rewarded when we get these likes, and we feel more confident. So honestly speaking, how can you guys say that social media isn't impacting our mental health? Thank you.
Right on time. Okay. Thank you, Mona. So you mentioned that there's an app on your phone that can track how much time is spent on social media.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be positive, because then you can monitor your usage of social media?
Yeah, but that's basically just to highlight how many hours, and it's to show us. It doesn't really send you a notification like, oh, stop using your phone. Like, I also checked that screen time app by the end of the week, and I'm like, okay, I spent like 34 hours on Thursday, or like, sorry, in 2 days, or it shows you exactly, like, on Thursday you use your phone more than you use it on Wednesday. It doesn't really like stop you from using your phone. It just shows you how many hours you spend on social media.
To add to that, actually, so it's the iPhone that's sending these notifications to you. So unless, of course, you were to recognize the impact that it has on your mental health and take specific steps to instruct your phone to curtail your activities on social media, it would still be having that negative impact. So it's not just recognizing that you spend a lot of time on social media that helps you. It's recognizing that, oh, I spend a lot of social media time and that impacts my negative health. I need to curtail on that.
So that leads the way for you to make better decisions on how you use your social media.
Yeah, but it still doesn't affect your mental health. Like, it's nothing to do with mental health. I was just trying to give them a tip so they can see how much time they spent on their phones.
Majid, can we hear from you?
Yeah, so it's easy for us to blame social media for all the mental health issues that plague the youth today, such as depression, anxiety, or post-traumatic stress disorder. However, as my colleague Fatma previously touched upon, we can't ignore the many other factors that have been causing these mental issues for decades, way before social media existed, and that continue to do so until today. Things like substance abuse, emotional distress, and child abuse. Now, when it comes to substance abuse, alcohol and drug abuse can increase the underlying risk for developing a mental health condition. Now, according to the Child's Mind Institute, a study was done in 2016 on 10,000 adolescents. And it found that 2/3 of those who had developed either alcohol or drug use disorder had at least one mental health issue. Now, with that in mind, when we look at the results from the National Survey on Drug Use and Health, it finds that an estimated 19.9 million Americans aged 12 or older were current users of a drug in 2007. And another study done by the National Institute on Alcohol Abuse showed that in 2015, 26% of people aged 18 or older reported that they engaged in binge drinking in the last month. So it's really no coincidence that many adolescents have these mental health issues, and there's a clear correlation between adolescents abusing drugs and developing these mental health conditions, a reason that is far more stronger and far more obvious than social media. And when it comes to emotional distress, adolescents are at a much greater risk of developing a mental health condition due to emotional distress. Now, this distress, rather than coming from social media, comes from things like one's living condition, the discrimination they face, or the lack of access to organizations or professional help to help cure these mental health issues. And we will look at their living conditions. In the UK, for example, The Guardian reported that 33% of the entire UK population reported that they experienced depression and anxiety within their household because of housing costs and poor housing. The Guardian also reported that children who lived in a temporary home for more than a year are 3 times more likely to develop a mental health condition such as depression or anxiety. Places where there are armed conflicts and war zones are another factor that impact one's mental health, and that has nothing to do with social media. According to the British Medical Journal, the prevalence of PTSD, anxiety, and depression within adolescents was found to be 23 to 70% in Palestine and 10 to 30% in Iraq. Those are huge numbers, and they all come from living in a place where there is armed conflict. Again, these things don't come from social media. And a very good real-life example of such a place is refugee camps. Refugee camps such as Jabaliyah in Gaza or Za'atari in Jordan are prime examples of places where adolescents don't have access to social media. Some of them might not even know what social media is. However, the mental illnesses that they have are as severe, if not more severe, than those who do have access to social media. For example, according to the Center on Human Rights Education, on average, adolescents and children who live in refugee camps are 40% more likely to develop PTSD, anxiety, or depression. And now there's child abuse. Now, children who are abused at a young age are a lot more likely to develop a mental health problem later in their life. And now child abuse can come in many forms. It could be psychological or sexual or physical, or it could be neglect, it could be emotional. And a research from the UAB College of Arts and Science interviewed adolescents and emerging adults who have reported that they have been abused at some point in their life. The study showed that children aged 6 to 12 who were physically or sexually abused are a lot more likely to develop symptoms of depression, anxiety, or PTSD. And I mean, today we can see the kind of damage that child abuse has done. Even when we look at pop culture and certain pop icons like the Michael Jacksons or the R. Kellys, we see that these people have been severely damaged, and that we're now seeing the results of what that damage has done, and that all comes from child abuse. Again, that has nothing to do with social media. And that shows that there are much greater, more powerful and reasons to why adolescents are developing mental health conditions rather than social media.
Thank you, Majid. Yeah, you brought up that child abuse, upbringing, growing up in war zones, drug use do impact somebody's mental health. However, we're not doubting you. I believe you. I believe the research that you presented. But that doesn't take away from the fact that social media does not contribute to mental health and that it doesn't play a significant role.
Well, at the end of the day, social media is just the tool. It's just a platform. It's a tool that could be used either for good or for bad. So taking away social media or blaming social media won't really help solve the problem. If you want to solve the problem, you have to go to the core reason and solve it there. Like they say, you have to cut off the head of the snake. Taking away social media will not help cure substance abuse or child abuse. So going to the core and solving that problem is really what will create progress.
Thank you. And last but not least, we have Reem.
All right. As my colleagues have mentioned, there are many reasons as to why social media should not be blamed for the increase in mental health disorders amongst the youth. Concerns about social media effect on mental health has often been presented in bleak terms. What I'm going to be touching upon today are the limitations of the studies that try to prove the notion that we're discussing today, that social media is in fact directly linked to the increase in mental health disorders amongst the youth. some of the main areas that have been studied include depression, anxiety, sleep disorders, and low self-esteem. A study by Woods in 2017, it was carried out on 467 adolescents by answering a questionnaire. This study examined how social media use is related to poor sleep quality, anxiety, depression, and low self-esteem. The results included a very small relation between social media use and poor sleep quality. However, associations of social media with mental disorders such as depression and anxiety remains unclear. Also, this study assumes that social media use is a direct cause for poor sleep quality. But it also could be the other way around. Like people who have poor sleep qualities can go for can increase their social media use as a coping mechanism or sleep aid. Another study by Vernon in 2017, it documented the effects of, again, disturbed sleep on adolescent functioning. Even though the study was a longitudinal study over a span of 3 years, during the high school years of the subjects studied, it didn't show any evidence whether social media use causes depression in adolescents. Now, the study didn't use a control and comparison group to differentiate those who were exposed to social media and those who weren't. So it was difficult to conclude that an increase in depression was more in those who were exposed to social media and those who weren't. So we should keep in mind that most of the study and research that has been carried out was carried out on a healthy population, like school students, university students, and general adolescents. So when a research says, for example, social media use or time spent on social media increases depression, they don't necessarily mean that the subjects studied were clinically diagnosed by professionals. They could mean that they had some mood swings while being on social media. Another major problem of most of the studies and researches is that that try to prove this notion that social media is the direct cause of mental health issues, is that they use the cross-sectional study approach. Basically, what this means that the subject is studied in one specific point in time. It's observational and descriptive in nature, so they cannot determine the cause of something in this context, a mental disorder. It's important to note that the existence of correlation does not necessarily equal causality. However, it's recommended to carry out longitudinal studies. The subject in longitudinal studies, the subject is studied over a longer period of time, and that way they can see the changes in the subject's characteristics and mental health, and then they can come to a solid conclusion that yes, maybe there is a relation between social media use and mental health. As Valkenburg and Peter concluded in their discussion of computer-mediated communication, future research should further explore the exact conditions and mechanisms that explain the effects of social media use. Future research should also attempt to understand whether and how social media effects occur so that interventions can be designed to mitigate the negative effects. Lastly, I would like to say that social media we have to keep in mind that social media is a new phenomenon. Many questions regarding its potential impact on mental health remains unanswered. Thank you.
Thank you, Reem.